everyone, welcome back to Great Sports Debates, and today we are going to talk about the real MVP award in the NBA. This is the most prestigious award in the NBA, but like everything, it's been muddled and messed up by the writers, the players, the media, and everyone involved. So today, we're going to go all the way back to the 1959-1960 season to correct this. Of course, we're going to need to have a nice little criteria. So, I think what we're going to start with is production, like we did in the NBA GOAT series, as the numbers have always been a key metric. They don't change, and you can't have opinions about them. Domination will be very similar here, as we're looking at one season at a time, but we'll focus on things like points or rebounds in a game better than the competition. Third will be impact, which will consider how much the player's production helped the team, whether in record change or getting them over the top. And finally, winning, which I always say is the ultimate goal, but I have to remind people all the time, we gotta recognize not just the players' teammates, but the other teams that they're facing as large factors in what teams win. And winning can mean more than just winning the championship, which I understand is the most important thing. But when we're looking at individual players, sometimes we put that metric a little too high. So keep in mind, with this criteria, storyline is irrelevant. Let's start with the 59-60 season. Wilt Chamberlain's rookie year, his first MVP. And on the new list, he keeps the award. His team improved by 17 wins, and his numbers were far superior to anyone in probably the greatest rookie year ever, averaging 37.6 points per game, 27 rebounds, and 2.3 assists a game. Not only were his points per game and rebounds rookie records, but only Wilt himself has ever eclipsed these marks. And let's not even think about if blocks and steals were recorded at this time. In 1961, Bill Russell was awarded the MVP, but on my list, he loses the award to Wilt Chamberlain. The Celtics might have had the league's best record, but they also have former MVPs, All-Stars all over the roster. Just compare how different their numbers are. In 1962, Russell again won the award, and likely the biggest robbery ever. On my list, he loses the award to Chamberlain. And I'm not going to say anything else about the most dominant year in league history. Just look at the numbers here. You all already know them. This is, I don't even have words for it. For 1963, once again, Russell wins the award. But once again, we give it to the most deserving guy, and that is Wilt Norman Chamberlain, as he leads Russell by a huge margin across the board in everything except team success. 1964 is a tricky year where Oscar won the award in possibly his best season with 31.4 points per game, 11 assists, which led the league, and 9.9 rebounds on 48.3% shooting, leading all guards. Oscar also led the league in free throw percentage and won 55 games. But Wilt still has the edge, leading the league in minutes again with 46.1 and points per game at 36.9 on 52.4% shooting from the field, as well as 22.3 rebounds and 5 assists per game. And if his teammates were not horrendous on open shots, they likely win the title that year. Just go ahead and take a peek, 1964 playoff series. If you haven't seen the games or you haven't looked at the numbers, look at his teammates' field goal percentage. It's pretty bad. And if you see any of the highlights, you'll see how many wide open shots these guys missed. And I think that's kind of the story of Wilt in the early 60s. But moving on to 1965, Russell wins the award again. But again, it's a two-man race between Wilt and Oscar. Wilt again led the league in points per game and field goal percentage. But this time, we give Oscar the edge based on team success. And his numbers weren't too bad either, with 30.4 points per game, 9 rebounds, and an NBA record at the time, 11.5 assists per game. Oscar also led the league in minutes that year. And this is a good point to look. Oscar Robertson is probably one of the most underrated players in NBA history. And he's overshadowed because, he didn't win a lot of MVPs because he's playing at the same time as Wilt Chamberlain, who has the most impressive peak production of anyone in NBA history. And Bill Russell, who's the ultimate winner that was winning every year with the Celtics. So in 1966, Wilt wins the MVP on the 76ers. And on my list here, he keeps the award over West and Oscar, while he once again led the league in points per game at a 33.5 clip, 24.6 rebounds, and a field goal percentage of 54%, with his minutes at a staggering 47.3 minutes per game. And he also led all the advanced stats. Wilt also had 5.2 assists per game, and the team won 55 of the games he played. In 1967, Wilt again wins the MVP award, and again he keeps it on my list. While the counting numbers are much lower than his normal, he still leads the league in rebounds with 24.2, as well as minutes per game. But the part that's really impressive is he obliterated the NBA field goal percentage mark, shooting an ultra-efficient 68.3% from the field in a much less efficient era. And this is something I really want to point out because, again, when you look at the field goal percentages guys had in this era, this is so far beyond, especially for a guy taking so many shots and getting hit so many times. It just goes to show when he even had a little bit of help, his teams killed it. He also found more open layups than anyone in the league, being third in assists and the best ever for a center at 7-point assists per game from the center position. Now, again, this is something that you have to see the eye test when you look at the gravity, all the people that surround him, that he's literally able to flip the ball to guys for wide open shots and wide open layups. And Philadelphia that year also set a new NBA record for winning with 68 wins against 13 losses. In 1968, Wilt was again awarded MVP and again keeps the award on this list. In 1968, Wilt led the league in PER for the 8th time in 9 years, despite the league not counting his steals and blocks. He also led the league for the 8th time in 9 years in minutes, field goal percentage for the 6th time, rebounds for the 7th time, and assists for the first time, leading the league in assists as a center. Philly also won 62 games that year, again most in the league, and they were the number 1 defense in the league. In 1969, Wes Unseld won the MVP. No one jumps out this year with Wilt, Reed, Oscar, Frazier, Russell, and West all having solid claims in probably one of the weakest MVP fields. But in this scenario, we're going to have Wilt edging it out as he led the league in minutes, win shares, rebounds, field goal percentages, and free throw attempts, and finishing just behind West for second in PER. I think he would have been first in PER and blocks if blocks were recorded at that point. And, although his point per game numbers are a little pedestrian for Wilt standards, he's probably the guy that wins it that year, as his team won 54 games as well. In 1970, Willis Reed won the MVP. But despite more team success, I think Jerry West is the guy who deserves the award this year. Well, Wilt started off as the focal point of the offense and was back to his dominant ways again. He went down with the total rupture of his patella tendon, and West went off, leading the league at 31.2 points per game on 49.7% shooting. He was first in win share, he was first in player efficiency rating, and he was the best defender at his position as a first team defense, as that award, I believe it started that year or maybe the year before. The team did drop down to 46 wins, but still with his numbers and both two-way play, I really can't see anybody to put ahead of him. In 1971, Kareem wins the MVP, and he starts his string of keeping the award on my list. And honestly, he's probably number 2 for the 1971 as well. The Bucks won 66 games behind his 31.7 points per game, 16 rebounds a game, and 3.3 assists on a much improved 57.7% shooting. He was second team defense and dominated most of the advanced stats like win share and player efficiency rating. In 1972, surprise, Kareem again wins the MVP, and he's definitely keeping it in his best season. Despite the Lakers setting the record for wins that year, again behind Wilt winning 69, Kareem, like Wilt, had a historical third season with 34.8 points per game, 16.6 rebounds a game, 4.6 assists on 57.4% shooting. Like most of the 70s and the early 80s, he leads in most advanced statistics, including win shares and PER. Side note, the Bucks also won 63 games that year, so all around, nobody close to Kareem. In 1973, Dave Cowens won the award in another really strange and bad robbery. Kareem was literally better at everything. I mean, just look at the numbers in comparison. Probably closest to Kareem would be Nate Archibald, who had a great offensive season, leading the league in points and assists, but his efficiency wasn't nowhere near Kareem's level. The team's success was nowhere near Kareem's level, and obviously he's not the same kind of defender or rim protector that Kareem is. In 1974, Kareem won the MVP and clearly keeps it, leading the league again in win share, plus or minus, value over placement player, and he had 27 points a game, 14.5 rebounds a game, 4.8 assists, 1.4 steals, and 3.5 blocks. And the first year the NBA officially recorded blocks and steals. Kareem also got his first team defense. Bob McAdoo was likely his closest competition, and in 1975, Bob McAdoo won the MVP. And despite Kareem being the better defender, we're going to give it to McAdoo this year. McAdoo led the league with 34.5 points per game on 51.2% shooting. Anytime you're scoring that high at that clip, that's going to be hard to beat. That guy also had almost 10 free throw attempts a game, and he was making over 80% from the stripe. McAdoo also had 14.1 rebounds, 2.2 assists, 1.1 steals, and 2.1 blocks, while also leading the league in minutes and win shares. McAdoo was undersized at center and probably one of the first stretch bigs, going about 6'9", and this was probably the best of several good seasons he strung together before being a star off the Lakers bench in their heyday on their loaded Lakers teams of the 80s. In 76, Kareem reclaims the MVP, both from the NBA and our list. In Kareem's first year in LA, he led the league in blocks, rebounds, win shares, plus or minus, value over replacement player, PER. He was second in scoring. Basically the standard Kareem season. In 1977, Kareem won the MVP, and no one was really close. This vote should have been unanimous, so we're just going to move right on to 1978, a year Bill Walton won the award. But really, I just guess this is probably voter fatigue or something. Yes, the Blazers had a great year, and Walton was a really good player. But Kareem was pretty much the same or much better in every category and metric. And Kareem played 4 more games than Walton did that season. So, looking at the numbers, you tell me who you think won. In 1979, Moses Malone wins the MVP in a very close competition between him, Kareem, and the old Iceman, George Gervin. And on my list, it was hard. I thought about Gervin. Gervin had super impressive offensive numbers. But I got to give it up to Kareem. It was a down year by Kareem standards with 23.8 points per game and 12.8 rebounds per game. But his assist and block numbers were both more than Moses Malone and George Gervin combined at 5.4 assists per game and 4 blocks. He was also the better defender and again made first-team defense. In addition to leading the league in blocks, he had his usual lead in a lot of the advanced stats like win share, box plus or minus, value over replacement player, PER, and on the list. In 1980, guess who? Kareem won the MVP and again is keeping it on our list over Dr. J, the Iceman again, and Larry Bird. Kareem won 62 games this year on 24.8 points per game, 10.8 rebounds per game, 4.5 assists per game, 1 steal, and 3.4 blocks on an ultra-efficient 60.4% shooting. He was again first-team defense, and in my opinion, he would have won the Defensive Player of the Year award if it existed at that time, just like him, Wilt, Russell would have done many times if the award was available. He again led the league in value over replacement player, box plus or minus, win shares, blocks. It goes on and on. In 1981, Dr. J won the MVP. And he's losing a very close race with Kareem, Bird, and Malone. Kareem gets the edge for defense and efficiency, posting a 26.2 points per game, 10.3 rebounds a game, 3.4 assists, 0.7 steals, and 2.9 blocks on a 57.4% shooting, which is just too much better than the other guys. And again, he leads in all the advanced stats. And the dude's 34 at this point. And, this is where I just implore people, everyone loves the GOAT series on Michael Jordan and Wilt Chamberlain. Nobody watches the one on Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And the fact is, the dude dominated for a long, long time. In 1982, Moses Malone won the award. And this time he runs away with it, leading the league in minutes, rebounds, offensive rebounds as always by a huge margin, win shares, PER, and had a really good stat line and probably his best year at 31.1 points per game, 14.7 rebounds a game, 1.8 assists, 0.9 steals, and 1.5 blocks on 51.9% shooting. His 6.9 offensive rebounds per game is the most ever by a big margin with a lot of his seasons to follow. And I would say even with Kareem's efficiency and higher blocks, assists, steals, all that, it just can't match that year. And this is kind of the point where Moses makes his little short run as maybe the top guy taking the torch from Kareem. In 1983, Moses Malone again wins the award on both lists. It's his first year in Philly, and he led the team to 64 wins on a team that everyone pretty much has in the conversation of one of the best teams ever. And in the 78 games he played, like I said, they won 64 of them. This should have been a unanimous decision as he had 24.5 points, 15.3 rebounds, and 2 blocks on 50% shooting. And he was finally first team defense. He also led the league in win shares, rebounds, offensive rebounds, and player efficiency rating. And this is kind of the sweet spot where Kareem's numbers are starting to dip a little bit, and Bird and Magic haven't quite risen to that level yet. But in 1984, Bird won the MVP, and he's keeping it in a close race over Bernard King, Magic, and this is one you probably haven't heard on anybody else's list. But I swear, if you just looked at the numbers and you were going back and you didn't see the games or anything, you would say, man, how did this guy Adrian Dantley not win the MVP that year? So going into that, AD, the teacher as they used to call him, was likely the best offensive player. But between his lack of passing, he's one of those guys that like to have his head down and dribble and taking his time posting guys up even though he wasn't that big of a guy. Average defense and consistent lack of team success, and some would even say his team chemistry. If you look at how good he was and how often he was traded or moved on, it's kind of hard to give it to a guy when Bird is so successful and he did everything great, posting 24.2 points, 10.1 rebounds, 6.6 assists on excellent passing, 1.8 steals, and 0.9 blocks on 49.2% shooting. If you haven't seen Bird, this guy can make highlights out of a passing reel. His passes are unreal. It's not passing just to pass. These are real assists where his passing skill gets guys open shots. Bird was also second team all defense. Something the other three guys, Dantley, King, and Magic all kind of range from average to a liability. And Bird was second to Dantley in both win shares and PER, which, like we kind of covered, if you just look at the numbers, you might give Dantley the edge, but Bird was the better two-way player who could do more and created an elite offense that won 59 times in his 77 starts, compared to, Dantley getting his, standard 45-win season. Like I said, the guy had like 4 30-point seasons, I think, in a row, or kind of all in that span, and he was always the greatest scorer and super efficient. But we're going to let Bird keep the award slightly here in 84. In 1985, Larry Bird won MVP on both lists again, and this time very comfortably. By this year, he was clearly the top guy in the league, but as we all know, it's short-lived. He led the league in win shares, player efficiency rating, box plus or minus, and minutes, among other advanced stats. In one of his top 3 years, Bird averaged 28.7 points per game, 10.5 rebounds a game, 6.6 assists per game, 1.6 steals, 1.2 blocks on 52.2% shooting, and 53.8% effective field goal percentage as the three-point shot starts to become more of a factor in boosting efficiency. Keep in mind there was also a rookie from Chicago on a losing team that scored 28.2 points per game, 6.5 rebounds per game, 5.9 assists per game, 2.4 steals, and 0.8 blocks on 51.5% shooting in a pretty damn good rookie season. In 1986, Bird won for the 3rd time in a row, and again on both lists, with Dominique probably being his closest competition, followed by Magic, Barkley, and surprisingly, a 38-year-old Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. This was Neek's one scoring title, but Bird, he just did everything else better. Here's a comparison between the two, with Bird winning all the advanced metrics as well. In 1987, Magic stole the MVP from Michael Jordan. It was Magic's best year, numbers-wise, but it was one of Mike's better ones number-wise too. And in my opinion, Kevin McHale and Larry Bird were also better than Magic that year too. So, the voting there is kind of suspect. The media always loved Magic. There's no way you can convince me he should have even been in the conversation, honestly. Mike's team was not good at this point, but this will be the second sub 500 guy to get it on a career best 37.1 points per game, 5.2 rebounds per game, 4.6 assists, 2.9 steals, and 1.5 blocks on an adequate 48.2% shooting. Now, I could see someone pointing to the wins of Boston, but with Mike leading every advanced metric, having the 5th best points per game season ever, only behind seasons of Wilt Chamberlain, mind you, I can't ignore the greatness. His 9 straight 40-point games ties Kobe as only behind streaks held by Wilt Chamberlain. He didn't make the all-defensive team, but he probably should have, as his increased intensity, crazy steals, and blocks numbers were starting to get noticed. In 1988, Jordan starts to solidify himself as the best player, winning MVP, and he absolutely keeps it on this list. Despite Barkley and Bird arguably having their best years, with both having win shares over 15, Mike had his best win share season ever at 21.23, which is 9th all-time and is only behind a George Mikan season, 3 Kareem seasons, and 4 Wilt seasons. This is arguably Mike's best year, averaging 35 points per game, which is 10th all-time, just behind James Harden, Rick Barry, Kobe Bryant, Mike's previous year, and multiple Wilt seasons. But the really impressive part is that this is done on 53.5% shooting, which most of those guys above him were not that efficient, as well as 84.1% from the stripe on 10.5 attempts a night. Mike also led the league in steals with 3.2 steals per game, which is a big number, and he made first team all defense. He also had 5.5 rebounds, 5.9 assists, 1.6 blocks, and the guy won Defensive Player of the Year in one of the best MVP campaigns ever. If people didn't know during the last year, everyone at that point knew or should have known Mike was on top, beyond a couple of bad writers that, just tried to play the winning card. And, we know what happens there as well. The Bulls were even over 500 this year at 50 wins. So, 1989, you think it's Jordan again, but, they gave it to Magic again. But, Mike should have won in a landslide. Magic and Barkley both posted a 16.1 win share season, tied for second, behind Mike's 19.8. And if you look at the numbers and the season and everything else, nobody was really close, and I can't understand it. Mike had 32.5 points per game, 8 rebounds per game. He had a career high 8 assists per game as well. This was the year where they tried out the point guard experiment, and with Mike, he looked good no matter where you put him. I mean, dude, at this point in his career, I wouldn't be surprised if you put him at 5 and he dominated. He had 2.9 steals, which is one of several years he finished second to Stockton, with numbers that would typically lead the league. And he had 0.8 blocks, which is good for a guard, not quite his normal metric. And he did all that on 53.8% shooting. He also led the league in minutes, and as norm by this point, all the advanced statistics. Again, if somebody in the comments can please give me like a logical reason, like, yeah, I know the Lakers won more or whatever, like, it just doesn't even make any sense at all to me how Mike loses this award. This one's up there with, some of the Wilt and Kareem robberies. So in 1991, Jordan won the award on both lists again. No big surprise. No one really close. But the closest guy was probably another guy who's just really underrated for some reason, David Robinson, who led the league in rebounds and blocks and made first-team defense as well. And Robinson had 25.6 points per game, 13 rebounds a game, 1.5 steals, and 3.9 blocks, which is a big number, on 55.2% shooting, which is, a lot more efficient than, the other center he's typically compared to. Mike, on the other hand, had 31.5 points, 6 rebounds per game, 5.5 assists, 2.7 steals, and 1 block on 54% shooting, which is really good for a perimeter player. Despite, we all know he finished a lot in the paint. And as usual, Mike had the edge in advanced stats. In 1992, surprise, drumroll, MJ won the award, and no one was close again. This was the Bulls' best year prior to the first retirement, and I'll just get to his numbers for this one. 30.1 points per game, 6.1 rebounds, 6.1 assists, and 2.3 steals on 52% shooting for the best player on both ends. In 1993, Charles Barkley won the MVP, and I think he loses it to Mike here in a close battle. 93 was an off-peak year for both guys, but Barkley's team had the best record in the league, which probably got him the nod as well as voter fatigue. Charles posted 25.6 points per game, 12.2 rebounds, 5.1 assists, and a pretty good number for Chuck at 1.6 steals on 52% shooting, which is a good number, but low for what Charles had the past several years. Mike had 32.6 points per game, 6.7 rebounds per game, 5.9 assists per game, and 2.8 steals on, again, low for him, but still good, 49.5% shooting. And when you factor in Mike's defense, maybe it's really not even that close. So changing it up here, 1994, in Mike's absence, Hakeem Olajuwon won the MVP. But on my list, he loses it in a close race between him, Shaq, and David Robinson. And I got to give it to the Admiral, who won the scoring title that year and led all advanced statistics while being an elite defender, rim protector, and really leading his team. Like, if you look at the impact between when he's on the team and when he's not, it's about as big a difference as anybody in the league at this point. And here's the statistical breakdown between all three. Like I said, all good numbers, all splitting hairs here. You know, Robinson and Hakeem were both elite defenders. Shaq was a pretty good defender at this point as well. And they all had good offensive numbers. So, but we're giving it to Robinson there. In 95, Robinson wins the MVP and he keeps it. Shaq's probably the next closest person. But, you know, again, Robinson leads the league in PER, win shares. His team had the best record with 62 wins. He was first team defense. And, you know, if you looked at the playoffs, you'd probably give it to Hakeem because Hakeem went off that year in the playoffs and they rallied after not really having a good year and won the title. But looking at the regular season and being honest, David Robinson keeps it again in 95. In 1996, Jordan bounces back to win the MVP again. Mike's numbers might have dipped from his prime, but with Rodman and Pippen, the Bulls won 72 games, a record at the time, and it felt like they would always win. And no one else had a huge season, leaving Mike still on top. Mike led the league with 30.4 points per game, 6.6 rebounds, 4.3 assists, 2.2 steals, and half a block on 49.5% shooting. Still very elite, even if it isn't quite the numbers he had his first go-round. And with the closer three-point line and all the offensive changes, this was the 13th most efficient season by EFG, despite the field goal percentage lagging behind most of the 80s and 90s. Now, David Robinson was probably next best in that year, but in 1997, Karl Malone won his first MVP, and we're letting him keep it in a toss-up here. Both Malone and Jordan were first-team defense, even though neither one of them probably deserved it at this point, especially Karl. Looking at the numbers, they are pretty even, but Karl led in PER and was much more efficient. Mike still edges him in most of the advanced stats and wins, so this is probably one of the closer ones. In 1998, Jordan again won the MVP, and it's a three-way race for who should get it. Shaq once again had the best numbers, but isn't in the conversation as the guy still between not winning it all. He played 60 games that year as well as 54 and 51 the previous years. And only 49 the next year as well, which, you know, was a shortened season. But with Mike playing 82 games and Karl at 81, I'm going to lean towards Karl, who led the league in win shares with only 16.4. At Karl's 27 points per game, 10.3 rebounds, 3.9 assists on 53% shooting. In 99, Karl Malone won the MVP in possibly a makeup or an overcorrection vote as the oldest MVP, but clearly didn't deserve it this year. And somehow Shaq finished 6th in the voting, but he wins it on my list in one of the worst years for the MVP. The Lockout 99 season in general is one of the worst basketball seasons, as the guys from 1984 and before are gone or washed, And the guys that were starting to come in from the talent-rich class of 96 and beyond were still ascending. The league's field goal percentage that year was 43.7%, which is so bad there's only a few seasons from the 60s, 50s, and 40s that are worse. Between Jordan leaving the league, the lockout, bad play, a lack of stars, and no dominant teams, viewership declined rapidly. But still, even in a bad year, Shaq was best with 26.3 points per game, 10.7 rebounds, 2.3 assists, and 1.7 blocks on 57.6% shooting. Now, keep in mind, this was kind of at a very slow-paced time of the NBA. So, while the numbers don't look super great, they were definitely the best in the league by far. Shaq was now in his third LA season at 26 and about to become face of the league. In 2000, Shaq officially won his first MVP and did so by a large margin, and rightfully so. Shaq had 29.7 points per game, 13.6 rebounds, 3.8 assists, and 3 blocks on 57.4% shooting, and arguably his best season. This was another year that should have been a unanimous MVP vote, but one guy ruined it, and honestly, in my opinion, that person should have lost their vote. In 2001, AI somehow won the MVP, but again, this should have been MVP for Shaq for the third straight year. Shaq didn't win the scoring title again, but still scored 28.7 points, 12.7 rebounds, 3.7 assists, and 2.8 blocks on 57.2% shooting. Shaq might have lost some of the votes, missing 8 games, and his team winning 11 less games than the 67 they won the year before, but was still clearly the best player in the league with a 30.2 PER, 6 points higher than AI, who won the award. In 2002, Tim Duncan won the MVP, and he's keeping it, just ahead of Shaq, whose numbers declined for the third year in a row, and he returned to missing games, playing just 67 on the year. Duncan played all 82 with comparable numbers, and Duncan was an elite defender, while Shaq was already starting to decline on that end. In 2003, Tim Duncan won again in a close year. You hear a lot of people saying that year should have went to Duncan, Bryant, or even Shaq or KG. But my question is, why is nobody saying my guy T-Mac, who just led the league in scoring at 32.1 points per game, PER at 30.3, usage percentage 35.2, offensive win shares at 13.2, win shares per 48 at 2.262, offensive box plus minus 9.8, box plus or minus 10.5, and value over replacement player 9.3. I mean, my goodness, let's just start putting some respect on T-Mac's name, as he was in the conversation with Kobe and Duncan as the guys who were most likely to take the throne from Shaq at that point. In 2004, KG won the MVP, and honestly, no one was close. In KG's best year, he led the league in PER at 29.4, win shares at 18.3, win shares per 48, box plus or minus, value over replacement, and rebounds with 13.9, all on 49.9% from the field. Here's where it starts getting good. In 2005, Steve Nash won the MVP very fraudulently. I'm not saying he didn't have a good offensive season, but Shaq, Dirk, Duncan, LeBron, and KG all had better years, obviously. You could even argue his teammates, Amari and Marianne, were better as well based on their play, and all three of those guys didn't play as well when they weren't together. But this year comes down to two guys somehow ranked by the voters 6th and 11th, KG and LeBron James, who is in his second season. This was probably because their teams did not win as much, with KG's team dropping from 58 wins the year before to 44, and LeBron improving on a bad Cleveland team from 35 wins to 42. But in my personal opinion, I'm giving KG the slight edge with similar numbers that he had the year before. He was first team defense again, and he is leading the league in PER at 28.2, win shares at 16.1, box plus or minus at 9.5, and value over replacement player at 9.1, as well as rebounds at 13.5. I really don't get how he was so low in the rankings, really leading in every major stat category. In 2006, the voters did it again, somehow giving the award to Nash, and it's a two-man race again, but this time between LeBron and Dirk, who ranked the more respectable this time, second and third in the voting. Dirk and LeBron split the advanced stats, although I like LeBron's numbers a little more. And although neither was on an all-defensive team this year, LeBron was getting better on that end of the court, and his team also won about 50 games. On my list, LeBron now gains his first MVP after a close call the year before, and is about to start his reign as king of the league. In 2007, Dirk led the league in win shares and offensive numbers on the team with the best record, winning the MVP. But again, based on our criteria, Duncan, Kobe, and LeBron are two-way players with numbers almost as good. Duncan's numbers are good compared to the rest, but with less minutes and only scoring 20 points per game, I really couldn't consider him, even though he was super efficient and doing everything well at 54.6% from the field. Kobe's first team defense, which LeBron doesn't make until the next year or so, but he literally edges Kobe in every single category, with win shares 13.7 to 13, win shares per 48 206 to 199. As usual, field goal percentage 47.6 to 46.3, and even stuff like blocks 0.7 to 0.5, steals 1.6 to 1.4, assists 6 to 5.4, rebounds 6.7 to 5.7, minutes 40.9 to 40.8. LeBron had an 8.1 value over replacement player, which led the league to Kobe's 6.1. Box plus or minus 8.1 to 5.9. So, I mean, really LeBron had a lot of edges and did things more efficiency in general, despite Kobe actually having the edge in player efficiency rating, free throw percentage, and points. In a close call, I got to give LeBron the edge with double-digit more wins, plus he played one more game. 2008 gets interesting. The writers were at it again, likely giving Kobe the MVP after several near misses. And the 2008 race should have been a two-man race between LeBron and Chris Paul. And this time I'm going to give the nod to Chris Paul. Not that I think he was a better player, but he definitely had the better year. Or I would say I think he might have had the better year in a super efficient season. It was Paul's second best season of his career in his third year, leading the league in win shares at 17.8, win shares per 48, assists at 11.6, and steals at 2.7. He also scored 21.1 points on a really good 48.8% field goal percentage with a 52.4 EFG and only 2.5 turnovers. All great numbers for a point guard. Now, I wouldn't be mad if you leaned to the LeBron side and gave it to him based on, the teams he carried and what he's done so far. And he led the league in scoring at 30 points per game. And he edged Paul in player efficiency rating at 29.1 as well as value over replacement player and box plus or minus. But with a vote so close, I'm looking at Paul played better defense at that point, turned the ball over less despite handling the ball more and doing more, passing more, and he scored more efficiently, which really shouldn't be the case considering the shots he's taking compared to LeBron. And he had a far superior assist to turnover ratio as he was better in both categories. In 2009, the NBA had no choice but to finally give LeBron his first official MVP, as he was the runaway winner in arguably one of his best seasons. His 20.25 win shares is one of 17 times somebody had a win share season over 20, along with Oscar Robertson and multiple time participants George Mikan 3 times, MJ 3 times, Kareem 3 times, and of course Wilt 6 times. LeBron is still currently, as of 2023, the most recent guy to hit that mark of 20 win shares in a game. His PER of 31.67 is also his highest ever and is only behind MJ, Giannis twice, Wilt twice, and the Joker in 21-22. And keep in mind, though, of course, Kareem and Wilt's PERs would be higher with their blocks and steals added in. I have no clue how this selection was not unanimous, as he led a bad Cleveland team to 66 wins on 28.4 points, 7.6 rebounds, 7.2 assists, 1.7 steals, and 1.1 blocks on 48.9% shooting. In 2010, same story, LeBron in his prime, wins MVP on all lists, leads all advanced stats, scores 29.7 points with 8.6 assists, 7.3 rebounds, 1.6 steals, and 1 block on 50.3% shooting and an effective field goal percentage of 54.5. He also wins 61 games on another bad Cavs team. This was also the emergence of Kevin Durant, as he was the runner-up with offensive numbers good enough to win in some years. In 2011, whether it was voter fatigue or the move to Miami, Derrick Rose won the MVP, despite LeBron being better in virtually every metric. In addition to the counting numbers, LeBron also led in all advanced stats and was the better defender. Take a look at the numbers and let me know what you think. In 2012, James won again and keeps it on our list, and he won almost every metric again, while Kevin Durant again plays second fiddle with great numbers. 2013, James had a season that rivaled his 2009 season. He had the outrageous PER, 31.6, and win shares 19.6 again. But the efficiency was crazy with a 640 true shooting percentage, 56.5 field goal percentage, and a 60.3 EFG. Good for 26.8, 8 rebounds, 7.3 assists, 1.7 steals. Simply put, this should have been another obvious unanimous selection, as LeBron was also runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year, and in my opinion should have won it. But one guy messed it up again. Of note, Kevin Durant also had a really great season with 18.9 win shares, 28.1 points, 7.9 rebounds, 4.6 assists, and 1.4 steals on 51% shooting. In 2014, Durant finally won after some complaining, and this is a very close two-man race, with Durant getting the slight edge on offense, winning his 4th scoring title, and edging LeBron in all the advanced stats and wins. But LeBron has Durant in scoring efficiency, assists, steals, and is one of the league's best defenders at this point. In my opinion, LeBron wins in a super close race. In 2015, Steph Curry wins the award, and in another weak MVP year, I'm going to give Anthony Davis the edge over Curry, Harden, James, and Paul. Davis was the only defender in this group at this point, as LeBron was starting to regress on that end and go into his load management phase as he moved back to Cleveland during the season. Davis put up 24.4 points, 10.2 rebounds, 2.2 assists, and 1.5 steals, with 2.9 blocks on 53.5% shooting. Davis was 4th in Defensive Player of the Year voting that year, led the league in blocks, and PER at a good number, 30.3. In 2016, Steph won the MVP again, but this time he's the first actual unanimous, and despite being a defensive liability, he was so good and so efficient, it didn't matter. Steph had 30.1 points per game, 5.4 rebounds, 6.7 assists, and 2.1 steals on 50.4% shooting, which sounds great, but when you consider his 45.4% three-point shooting on 11.2 attempts, you get a career high 630 EFG and a 66.9 true shooting percentage. In addition to leading the league in true shooting percentage, he also led in PER at 31.5, which is a really good mark, as well as leading in all the other advanced stats by a good margin. Free throw percentage at 90.8%, steals, and points. He also shattered the previous three-point record of his, by the way, at 286 with 402. In 2007, Russell Westbrook won the MVP on the old triple-double narrative, but his inefficient run is definitely behind Harden, Leonard, and James. Between Harden and James, Harden led the league with 15 win shares and had the higher counting numbers. But James shot over 10% better from the field and had a lot less turnovers, as Harden set the mark at 5.7 a game, which is pretty bad. Harden played 7 more games, led the league in assists at 11.2, and had 29.1 points, 8.1 rebounds. LeBron had 26.4 points, 8.6 rebounds, and 8.7 assists. We're going to give it to LeBron here with the slight edge as well in effective field goal percentage and true shooting percentage as well. In 2018, Harden won the MVP, but we give it to James, who had 27.5 points, 8.6 rebounds, and 9.1 assists on 54.2% shooting, compared to Harden, who had 30.4 points with 5.4 rebounds and 8.8 assists on 44.9% shooting. LeBron led the league in minutes, value over replacement player, and his .621 true shooting percentage and .590 EFG again edge Harden as well, who led the league in other advanced stats including PER and win share. LeBron also played 10 more games and was better on the defensive end, although neither were really great at this point. In 2019, Giannis won MVP, and despite being one of the best defenders, I can't ignore the offensive output of James Harden this year. Harden's 36.1 points per game is so far ahead of everyone and is almost 9 points a game more than Giannis. Harden also has Giannis in assists, steals, and once again leads the league in win shares. The big difference is Giannis's lead in field goal percentage at 57.8% compared to 44.2%. But it actually gets a little closer when you look at EFG of 59.9 to 54.1 or true shooting percentage of 64.4 compared to 61.6. Plus Harden played more minutes in 6 more games. Again, in a close vote, despite Giannis being the better defender, I'm leading Harden in this year with over 36 points per game. In 2020, Giannis wins the MVP, and this time he wins the race against Harden, as he was the Defensive Player of the Year. Giannis's team had the best record, and the offensive numbers are closer, with Giannis being much more efficient again. Here's the numbers for comparison. In 2021, Jokic won the MVP, and it's a race between him, Giannis, and Embiid. At the time, I felt like Jokic was the worst of the three, based on the least volume, his defense, and his head-to-head matchups with Embiid, where it really looked like he struggled and Embiid could still do whatever he wanted. But ultimately, the Joker played all 72 games that year, 9 more than Giannis, and double-digit games more than Embiid. He also led in all the advanced metrics and shot enough with 18 shots a game. His decision-making is flawless, and the way he forces teams to double or score is underrated. The Joker's going to get the close nod in 2021. In 2022, it was again a 3-man race between Jokic, Embiid, and Giannis, and again Joker wins on both lists. This time the Joker puts some distance on his competition, increasing all his numbers across the board with an impressive 27.1 points per game, 13.8 rebounds, 7.9 assists, 1.5 steals, and 0.9 blocks, all on 58.3% shooting. But the part that makes this really impressive is with his 81% free throw shooting and his 38.8% shooting from the three-point line this year. He had a 60.2 EFG and a 66.1 true shooting percentage, leading to the best PER ever at 32.8, with the caveat, as we mentioned, that Wilt probably has multiple seasons better when you add his blocks and steals in. And of course, he led all advanced stats again. This one was easy for Joker. And finally, in 2023, for the third time, the same three guys were involved. However, it really came down to the Joker and Embiid. Embiid got the vote with some campaigning and maybe some trying, but there were some concerns, maybe that, hey, Joker winning 3 times in a row compared to other guys that won 3 times in a row. I'm not really sure. But even with Embiid improving his numbers across the board, winning the scoring title again, and beating the Joker by almost 9 points a game, which is a huge margin, I still think the Joker has the slightest edge, as he really led in everything else, and his drops in points came at increased efficiency and increased assists that made the team better. Just take a look at the numbers and really consider how scary efficient the Joker was. So that wraps up going from the 59-60 season all the way to current, and I'm going to try to keep updating this over time, and I'd love to get you guys' feedback, comments, complaints, concerns, so I know where I went right, where I went wrong. But the prize at the end for those of you who made it there is, here's the real MVP list and what the real MVP counts look like. So with that information, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share, and hit me in the comments. Thanks a lot.